The so-called first 5 books of Moses close with these words in the 34th chapter of Deuteronomy. Moses went up from the lowlands of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, eastwards from Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, the whole of Naphtali, the territory Ephraim and Manasseh, and all Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev and the plain, the valley of Jericho, city of palms. And the Lord said to him, "This is the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that I would give to their descendants. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross over into it." So there in the Moabite country, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died as the Lord had said. He was buried in a valley in Moab opposite Beit Peor, and to this day no one knows his burial place. But Moses was 120 years old when he died, his sight undimmed, his vigor unimpaired. And there's never yet arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. So remember the strong hand of Moses and the awesome deeds he did in the sight of all Israel. There's a recent study out entitled "The Search for Meaning," and it begins with these words: "We're living in the midst of a spiritual crisis of unprecedented proportions. We suffer, in a word, from meaninglessness, which in turn leads to separation and alienation and ultimately to despair on the part of many. Many who are physically alive appear to be spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually dead. And these living dead can be found everywhere, glued to CNN hour after hour, hoping for an event in an uneventful life, reciting religious creeds in which they do not believe on Sunday morning, playing golf at the country club, working on an assembly line, saying, 'Have a nice day,' spending endless hours in shopping malls, commuting to work, feigning interest in mindless jobs, being mesmerized by rock music, sitting through uninspiring classroom lectures, watching the Washington Redskins on television at the neighborhood sports bar. It is not by chance alone that the average American spends 28 hours a week watching television, or that cable television viewers will soon be able to choose from among 500 channels. Now, whether the picture is too severe, I leave for you to decide. Nevertheless, it remains true that we as human beings have an insatiable need for assurance that the spiritual, intellectual, and emotional dimensions of our lives are connected to something meaningful. We need a sense of purpose for our lives, pervasive sense, lest they become pointless. Our dilemma is that we live in a world in which life's meaning is not obvious, readily apparent. No matter how intense our desire for meaning, meaning often eludes us. One day, Charlie Brown is talking to his friend Linus about the pervasive sense of uselessness that he feels all the time. Charlie moans, "You see, Linus, it goes all the way back to the beginning. The moment I was born and set foot on the stage of life, they took one look at me and said, 'Not right for the part.'" So it's not easy. For all of us, there are days when we will wonder what it's all about, what sense there is to life, why we're here, whether we do in fact make any difference at all. So the question of meaning yields to no neat package, no pat answers, no bromides. It remains for all of us a highly personal quest, but a very necessary quest nonetheless. An old story insists that even though the way ahead in life is not always precisely mapped out, and even though it often looks more like wandering in the wilderness, there is a way to live toward meaning that saves us from emptiness and despair, on the basis of what God did through a man named Moses a long time ago. Remember the strong hand of Moses and the awesome deeds which he did in the sight of all Israel. Why remember? What did he do? First of all, in the name and power of a strange and mysterious new God, he took a collection of oppressed and despairing slaves, nobodies, helpless, and by freeing them, made of them a people who knew themselves chosen, gave them a dignity and a destiny that saved them for all time, even to this day. It was the gift of a sense of importance and worth like they had never known. And I think a sense of meaning in life always begins right here, with the confidence, the faith that we are important, the faith that we can make a difference in our world. It's not something we conjure up, however, or invent. It always comes to us from without, from an old story, from the strange mystery we call God, from one of his servants like Moses, or a Mr. Washington. One day a student in the 11th grade went into a classroom to wait for a friend. The teacher appeared and asked him to go to the blackboard. He replied, "I'm not one of your students." Teacher says, "Doesn't matter, go to the board anyway." The student told him he couldn't do that, and the teacher asked why not, and the student said he was mentally retarded. The teacher walked over to the student and said, "Don't you ever say that again. Someone's opinion of you does not have to be your reality." And that was a liberating moment for that student. The teacher, Mr. Washington, became his mentor. He told in later years how at the end of the school year, Mr. Washington addressed the graduating seniors, and in his speech he said, "You all have greatness within you, all of you. You can touch thousands of lives if you will." After the speech, the student went up to him and said, "Did you mean me as well?" The teacher said, "Yes, Mr. Brown, I certainly did." In his senior year, it happened that Brown was placed in Mr. Washington's speech and drama class. Although Brown was a special ed student, the principal realized that this just might be a good match. Mr. Washington gave Brown a larger vision of himself. While other teachers passed Brown from class to class, Mr. Washington made more demands of him, held him accountable, enabled him to begin to believe in his own story. Years later, the famous Les Brown and his band of renown topped a successful career in the music world with 5 specials on NBC. Those of you of a certain vintage murmured when... Explain it to the rest of the crowd. And after the specials, he called a certain Mr. Washington to thank him for granting him a sense of destiny for his life. But the destiny that Moses calls this marginal people to live toward is quite specific. They are to become and be a community that lives together on the face of this earth under this strange and powerful God, in piety and peace, in justice and joy, in a land that he will give them. So to that end, he leads them not only to liberation from the old life of slavery in Egypt and a life of hopelessness, but also to a new life under the law of this God. He grants them not only a sense of destiny, but a sense of discipline to carrying them to that destiny. And I think this too is the heart of a meaningful life. There can be no sense of direction and purpose in life unless there is learned restraint of self-centered desires and inclinations which inevitably lead to dissipation and lack of focus and even finally despair. I am told that one of the reasons for the emptiness of life on so many college campuses today is the culture of hedonistic laxity which apparently reigns, the lack of purpose and focus on the part of so many students. It was said recently of one of the major universities in the East that at that university it is possible to get drunk 4 nights a week for 4 years and still maintain a B average. MBA students at Duke University were asked over several years to write a personal strategy for their lives. The question posed was, what do you want to be 5 to 10 years from now? With few exceptions, they wanted 3 things. They wanted money, power, and things, big things. And they wanted it now, and they wanted it all. Now the tragedy in this is that this attitude towards life is a materialistic cover for a lack of meaning. A lack of meaning that can in time become unbearable and lead to breaking out in all kinds of crazy directions. There's an email going around about John Walker, who left an affluent and comfortable way of life in California to go fight with the Taliban. Now, I can't vouch for its veracity, and I know it is dangerous judging from a distance, but it has a certain plausibility about it, this account. Apparently, the parents of John Walker, the Marin County child of privilege turned Taliban terrorist, never really drew the line in the life of their son or provided him with direction. not when he was 14 and his consuming passion was collecting hip-hop CDs with especially nasty lyrics, not when he announced at 16 that he was going to drop out of Tamsicle High School, the elite alternative school where students determined their own course of study and saw a teacher once a week. Not when he became a Muslim, grew a beard, took to wearing long white robes and an oversized skull cap. On the contrary, his father was, quote, proud of John for pursuing an alternative course, unquote. And his mother told friends that it was, quote, good for a child to find a passion, unquote. Not when he asked his parents to pay his way to Yemen so that he could learn to speak pure Arabic. Not when they learned that his new circle of friends included gunmen who had been to Chechnya to fight the Russians. Not when he headed to Pakistan to join a madrasa in a region known to be a stronghold of Islamic extremists. Curiously, only once did Frank Lind and Marilyn Walker seem to deny their son something he badly wanted. When he first adopted Islam, he took the name Suleiman and they refused to use it. They insisted on calling him John because they named him after that great model of our age, John Lennon. Devout practitioners of the self-obsessed non-judgmentalism for which the Bay Area is renowned, Lind and Walker appeared never to have tried to set limits for their son or criticize his choices. In their world, there were no absolutes, no fixed truths, no mandatory behavior of any kind. If they had one conviction, it was that all convictions are worthy, that nothing is intolerable except intolerance. But even in Marin County, there are times when children need to know that there are limits they should respect and expectations they should try to live up to. And if they cannot find these limits and expectations at home, they are apt to look for them elsewhere. Newsweek called it truly perplexing that Walker, who grew up in possibly the most liberal, tolerant place in America, was drawn to the most illiberal, intolerant sect in Islam. There is nothing perplexing about it. He craves standards and discipline and direction. Mom and Dad apparently didn't offer any. The Taliban did. Walker is responsible for his own behavior, and he will pay the price the law requires. But his road to treason and jihad did not begin in Afghanistan. You see, meaning in life, the sense of purpose comes of a sense of destiny, I count, I'm important, and a sense of discipline, the willingness to pay the price of trying to reach that destiny. And if we don't offer and find healthy disciplines that make for a community of justice and peace, it should not surprise us that some will flee to perverse and destructive forms of meaning. All of us crave cause and purpose, meanings and limits. And in a way, angry fundamentalisms are a reaction to the emptiness of much of modern life for many. And then I think meaning in life, a real meaning in life, comes from a sense of destiny and discipline that holds up for the duration, that's meaningful all the way to the end. If one danger in life is to opt for a kind of meaningless drift, another danger is to pile all of our purpose into one sector of our life experience, into our job, for example. A businessman obsessed with work to the point where he had no time for anything else, for family or fun, visits a counselor who suggests that he might spend an hour a week in the cemetery. Why on earth do you want me to do that? He asked. What should I do there? Not much. Take it easy, look around, get acquainted with some of the people there, and remember that they didn't finish their work either. Careers end, do they not? Kids leave home, causes come and go. Now, career and children and causes of one sort or another are all important, but only under an overarching commitment to a purpose that can sustain us all the way to Mount Nebo. Moses looks out over the future toward which his entire life has been lived. It's a magnificent future in a way. Some of us stood there last April. One can survey the land of promise from desert to green Galilee, from Jordan to the sea, still today. But the meaning of his life does not lie in arrival. It never does. The meaning of life always lies in the journey. the journey to Nebo. And it is enough that he can stand before his God, having been faithful to the end, and view the promise beyond. Meaning, in other words, derives from the sense that at no stage in life is it over. An English psychiatrist puts it this way: the secret of perpetual youth is to grow old. Life can only keep young by always advancing. The man of 30 keeps fresh by surrendering his athletic prowess to develop his individual power and character. The healthy young mother is infinitely younger than the girlish of the same age. The woman of 45, whose interests have been centered in her family, will remain young only by advancing to the phase in which she lets her interests spread to wider concerns of human life. The man of 55 need never be on the shelf if he voluntarily leaves the struggle for power to younger men and is content to contribute to society the wisdom gained in the ripe experience of years. These are fresh instincts which are ready to spring forth at every stage of life. And by welcoming these, we in a sense remain young. By advancing with age, we achieve a kind of perpetual youth. And Moses was 120 when he died, his sight undimmed, his vigor unimpaired. Not a bad thought. There's always something ahead of us to which God calls us. Now, admittedly, it's sometimes difficult to know, and it is a struggle to find out. But believing that is of great importance. Opera star Beverly Sills, I'm told, wears a piece of jewelry with the initials IDTA engraved on it. When a friend expressed concern that she was going to stop singing to become director of the New York City Opera some years ago, she pointed to this piece of jewelry and the initials, which she said stand for, "I did that already." Having sung for so long, she felt it was time to move on. She didn't want to repeat again and again what she had already mastered and already experienced. She felt a new sense of purpose and meaning and discipline in moving on to unexplored terrain. But you know as well as I do that it's easy to begin seeing life as a matter of kind of hunkering down and staying put, just hanging in there where we are, no longer believing that there's some special destiny and discipline to which God still calls us. The late George Burns, more and more a hero of mine as I get a little older, the late George Burns said, "Some people practice to get old. The minute they get to be 65 or 70, they sit down slow. They start taking small steps. I can't die, I'm booked." The thing that strikes me about this passage, as metaphor really, is that Moses, after all those years of labor and effort and awesome wonders, Moses is finally defined, not by how far he got, but what became of him as a human being. A man who knew God face to face. Like Jesus, who again grants a people, you and me, the gift of a destiny and discipline, no longer tied to blood and the land, but open to all of us who count him Lord and leader, and who find in him and his way our destiny and discipline, our meaning and future as we seek to follow in his steps and do his will. You know, the Apostle Paul sums up the whole meaning of his life with these words: "Forgetting those things which are behind, I press on toward the goal of the call to life in Christ Jesus." Your ultimate purpose, friends, and mine, your ultimate purpose in life is growing you into the kind of human being God sets before you in Jesus of Nazareth. And that's something you're not going to finish in one lifetime. Al MacDonald sent me another piece of his writing recently, a small work entitled Confessions of a Wandering Soul. I occasionally quote him because he reads these and then I get a new free book from him. Al is undoubtedly a man who found real meaning in his many professional and career experiences. U.S. Ambassador, Assistant to the President, White House Staff Director, President of Bendix Corporation, Managing Director and CEO worldwide of McKinsey & Company, member of the faculty of Harvard Business School, and many more. But wherein has Al discovered real meaning, real destiny, and discipline that is held up for the duration? Let me pass on to you a few of his words, highly edited. My spiritual journey is now my first priority in life. My main remaining ambition is to learn about and practice love. That is, I want to understand the love of God for me and all humankind and reflect it on to others in my daily life. I know it means vulnerability, a condition that I have studiously avoided. It means giving without expecting any return. It means acknowledging that I am a servant of God and not vice versa. I recognize that I have no real possessions, regardless of what the land deeds, the bank statements, and the stockbrokers tell me. I'm simply His agent, managing His resources and hoping that my stewardship ultimately will be pleasing to Him. None of my deceased wealthy friends have had Brinks armored trucks following their hearses. So the only road forward for me is to follow the will of God as best I can discern it. In my heart, I know this will bring new levels of satisfaction. In so doing, I aspire to learn like a child again, more about love and joy, thereby finding the real meaning of life that God intends for me. My mission statement for these last chapters of my life story is short, simple, and straightforward. It reads, to live every day and experience life to the fullest extent possible in ways that are pleasing to Jesus Christ. In Him, the future is bright regardless of my health, my remaining strength, or the length of my life. I can fully rejoice in every new day in which I'm blessed to greet the dawn, knowing in my heart that my wandering soul has found a perfect compass. Well, there's one friend who knows, I think, where he's going, a friend with a view from Nebo.